Well, hi everybody. Good evening to you. Professor Jen here, a little coffee table chat series, new ideas, trying to link up all the information that we know. So just to give you an idea, I'm doing this little lecturecast podcast kind of thing, and it's week 6. So we just got rid of Valentine's Day in my world. By the time you listen to this, it could be several weeks away. But I like to talk about topics as they seem relevant to us in pop culture, etc. Of course, I always love to thank captioning services for everything they do for us. Clearly, I could not do all this myself. Really need their expertise. Wonderful people. Anyhow, my dears, happy belated Valentine's Day. I hope you found love, felt love, ate love, listened to love, whatever it was you needed to do. I'm thinking to myself, days of fairy tales, days of Shakespeare. We could add in there, we could even add Hemingway, Mark Twain. We can add Thoreau, Emerson. We can look at Emily Dickinson in there. We can put a lot of people in. And I'm thinking to myself, what did people do in the days of Valentine and love, right? With no internet, no e-cards, no Walmart, no Amazon, no way to wire flowers, make a Valentine, send it in the mail. We just didn't have all of these opportunities. I'm thinking to myself how it really must have been very strange to have love. You figure 15th century, 16th century. I did a little research. Oh, that's my dog barking. I did a little research and I was looking up in my research when people fell in love or in lust, 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, it was fast. Like people didn't spend like we spend today, a year in relationships, 2 years in relationships, 3 years in relationships. They didn't have save the date cards for weddings. Things I think move very quickly. Why, right? So we always have to ask why. Why are we reading about quick aspects of love and fairy tales and different kinds of fictional pieces? How does it compare today in pop culture? I think back many, many years ago, probably even up until 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, before we had a more sophisticated snail mail system. I think people must have met, and I think that love as a topic, as a feeling, as an emotion, a way of life, I think it moved very quickly. I think people's ability to court one another, court, to sort of date one another, I think it moved very quickly. Why, right? Well, certainly diseases. That's one reason. People really didn't have a lot of premarital sexual relationships because we really didn't have the antibiotics and the necessary pills, shots, etc to combat different diseases people could get. So, of course, it would ruin people's marketability if they obviously had, some kind of a disease that was going to kill them, you know, rapidly or hurt them in any kind of way. So I think that the courting was quick and it had resolution, meaning I think people dated for the purpose of marriage, unlike today, which is an honest observation in our culture, though there are many cultures, the culture I'm talking about is here in the United States and our Western friends, etc. Especially you look at other countries, people are more apt today to put aside maybe traditional values, conventional values, and we have better birth control. We have different forms of communication. We have different levels of acceptance culturally, religiously, and people don't feel that need to rush. Back in the other times, I think it was like I just highlighted medical. I think men were often going off to some kind of war of some sort, right? Or they were going to build railways, or they were going to build ships or be on ships. And I think the idea of locking in that relationship was also very important something to hold people together, in way of hope, optimism. I'll tell you about my parents. My parents were sort of interesting. I thought they were boring at first, when I was young, but the more that I think back about them, they're both deceased. I think about them frequently these days. So how it ended for them really didn't look at all like it began. They got divorced in the 1970s, which was very unusual. 1970s was a place and time many people just really didn't think about divorce. It was something that was sort of, whispered. Certainly in fairy tales, we don't hear about divorce. Certainly in Shakespeare's time, we don't hear about divorce. And these other writers that I started off with. And my parents, they I don't know. They seemed like they liked one another, I thought. I'm sure they loved each other at a time, but the more I think back about them, they met in the summer of 1956 in August. Do the math with me. And they got married in January of 57. It was that fast. So we're talking about what, like 7 months. They met and got married. And I thought about it, and I once said to my mother when I was in my 30s, I was already at that point married, I had kids of my own. I said, 6 months didn't seem like a long time. She said, well, back in that day, there was really no premarital relations, sex, etc. And plus, she said, we were coming off the tail end of situations, Korea, etc. My father was in the Navy. She said, he was going to go back on a boat, on a ship, whatever, for long periods of time, which he did. And she said that, getting married wasn't only about sexuality, sexual intimacy, permission to feel intimacy, she said he got back on the ship and he felt like he could hold on, like he had a reason to come home. Whereas she said, back in those days, so many men that were in the military, they would get married very quickly because they felt, a new sense of purpose. I guess that's a way to put it. Do I think it's the reason to get married today in 2025? No, I don't think people should find a new sense of purpose in somebody else. I think it's more sophisticated and safer to say I'll find a sense of purpose in myself. But I can understand what she was saying to me back then. And the more I talk to people that are in their 80s today, that would have been my parents' age today, 90s, I come to realize that many people felt this way, that it was very important to lock in. So here we are, Valentine's week, closing the week out from Valentine's Day. And I think to myself, boy, how times have changed. Uh, People today, they get to know one another. There's all this texting, sexting. This can go on for weeks, months. I know people who have been texting for years. There's no engagement ring. There's no wedding vows, no nothing. I know people who have had trial relationships, meaning they move in together. They're together 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and then they just declare it didn't work out and they move on. It's just so new to us when you think about this. Certainly Depression era, 1929, uh, people just didn't live how we're living today. 1930s, 40s, 50s, as I just highlighted for you. I'll tell you where I think things changed. Things changed in the 1960s when the Vietnam War was gobbling up young people like yourselves. They were drafting men who were 18 years old to go off to this place they couldn't even find on a map. They'd never heard of it before. And a lot of the gals, at the time and place, they wanted to give these fellas a reason to come home. There were surges around the United States of very quick marriages at city halls when these young men, your age, 18, 19, would get drafted and sent to Vietnam. Then, of course, 9 months later, the birth rates in some regions really blasted upwards because, people consummated the marriage that night, and then these fellas went off to the draft. 1970s, became a little different. much more birth control. 1970s, clearly in New York State, women no longer needed permission from their husbands to get birth control. At one point in New York State, I'm sure this happened in other states. It's just I'm not an expert on other states. I'm an expert on this state. It used to be in the 1950s, 60s when a woman wanted to get birth control. First of all, she had to be married, period. End of story. Number two, she had to have the permission of her husband to get the birth control. So by the 1970s, women were able to obtain their own birth control. So that was a lot of freedom. Whether she is married, not married, she can take control of her reproduction. We don't really see this too often, this idea that women can take control of their reproduction in fairy tales. Again, fairy tales, as we've come to learn, is really written as a primer for children to understand. So I don't think the idea of sexuality in fairy tales and the idea of maybe being a female single parent was something that back in those days that they really even needed to discuss. Maybe the reason was because religion had already discussed that with children. So maybe it was such a taboo subject to discuss sex, sexuality, etc., reproduction rights, choice, etc., that, hundreds of years ago, we would never have even entertained that subject. In Shakespeare's time, he also sort of tippy-toes around the idea of reproduction, consummation, sexuality, sexual liaison, sexual coupling. He suggests it in some of his works, but he doesn't come right out and say it. He dances as close to the flame, I think, as society would let him at the time. Many writers, really, it's really been a surge for us, as audience, cultural context. It's really the last 50 years we're really able to talk about sex and sexuality as it relates to couples. I think we even see in many books. I'm thinking what is the one, Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. He sort of talks a little bit about sex, but I think he would have been censored terribly if he had gone any further and talked about sex and sexuality. I think, again, 1960s, we were ready. 1970s, we were definitely ready. And today, sex and sexuality and pop culture as we know it, it feels odd not to have some kind of sex and sexuality, even if it's gratuitous in any kind of literature, whether it's fiction, plays, you know, uh, memoir, anything. We're just so used to seeing sex and sexuality all over the place that I don't even think we realize that it's not so long ago we really couldn't have these kinds of dialogue without being censored, Clearly, I mean, back in the 1950s, if I was teaching this class and having this discourse discussing these kinds of comparatives, I probably would have been censored and censured and then fired. There you go. That's a mouthful right there, right? Happy Valentine's Day, right? Good luck to you. And probably wouldn't have been hired anyplace else because I would have been too salacious. I would have been, too readily aware and able to talk about sexuality. But clearly, Valentine's Day, I think about it back, so many years ago, how it must have been a marker. I look at this picture I put up for you with this nice little Valentine and the flowers and the little hearts and all. It must have really been a day in which people used as perhaps a day to do something big, engagements or a piece of jewelry. I think we become relaxed, certainly in literature and the arts, we can have galentines. I see that phrase now, where, gals that might not have a date, women that might have not have a date, they get together, they call it Galentine's Day. I saw uh Valentine's Day, where it was a bar somewhere in Buffalo that said, if you're a felon, you don't have a date, a man or a woman, non-binary, doesn't matter. But if you don't have a partner, significant other, come down, have a beer, have a slice of pizza. You know, we talk more today about even Valentine gifts. We've expanded our idea of love, for pets. People buy Valentines for their roommates. I know from my own children, I bought them candies and some other little things. We went out to dinner. So we've expanded our idea of the traditional romantic love, romantic partnership, a time for seeking perhaps intimacy, sexuality, sexual liaison with somebody else, some kind of a marker as a date with other people, a date with some kind of amorous intentions, romantic intentions. I think we've loosened up a little. I think today we can just see so many people, even on campus, that have celebrated Valentine's. I noticed it this year because I was really paying attention. I saw all kinds of people wearing pink, red, orange, talking about Valentines for their pets, Valentines for their friends, Valentines for their buddies, maybe their significant other, their partner. I overheard people talking about Valentines for their parents, how much they love their parents, and sending them a well wish or a little e-card or something. So I just wanted to end this for you with this idea that, maybe through language and literature, the arts, so many hundreds of years, we've expanded how it is that we see love, how we celebrate love, that love isn't just for lovers. We can be a lover of all kinds of things, people, our pets, friends, etc. You know, uh, that maybe love doesn't have to be as quick as it was hundreds of years ago because we're not competing with wars. We're not competing with no communication. We don't have to do anything very quickly today. We have the opportunity to have long distance relationships because the technology is there. The ability to fly is there. The ability to be accepted in relationships where maybe you're not with your partner every day. We can defer dates. People have today these very long engagements. We're back in the days of some of our more conventional, traditional fairy tales and fictional pieces. It's especially the time and place of Shakespeare. Maybe people really couldn't afford to spend a year with plagues, wars, droughts, etc., planning very large weddings. Maybe love didn't have so many different avenues. Maybe love wasn't so heavily marketed like it is today, engagement party, uh, rehearsal party, the groom's bachelor party, bachelorette party, the shower. Maybe we just didn't have all of this social and financial economy back then, and we didn't have time for all this. So maybe we've evolved in so many different ways, including how we spend on love, to think about it. So I wish you well. I hope you got all the little candy hearts your heart's desired. And if not, the best part of this whole story is it's always 50% off minimally after Valentine's Day. You can buy all kinds of custard hearts and little chocolates and things with nuts in them, all the good stuff. And I think to expand our awareness on love, to love all nouns, people, place, and thing. That's a nice way to look at it, to expand how we feel about our pets. I had a wonderful Valentine's Day with my three little dogs. Right now, we're fostering this little cat. This is sort of a sad story, but it's a timely story. And this cat, I'm not really a cat person, so don't get mad at me that I said that. I'm more of a dog person. But this little cat came up on Facebook. Somebody had talked about this cat, and the cat was living with its family. I don't know the family, but not far away from where I live. I live in Chileye, very close to RIT. And the cat lived in a house with its family. And the family got up and moved and did not take the cat. And I don't know what the reason was they didn't take the cat. Anyway, so the cat was left behind in a house. The landlord came to clean out the house, repaint the house, you know the rest of the story, right? And to get the house ready to rent to other people. So the landlord hired a maintenance person and said to the maintenance person, by February 1, this cat is out of the house. I don't care if you have to put it in the street. I'm done with this cat. I am not a cat person. And the cat has to go as I rented the house to new tenants and they have no interest in a cat. And that's the end of it. Now here's the maintenance guy, right? He now is faced with a direct order from his supervisor to remove the cat, but he's highly allergic to the cat or any cat. He can't bring the cat home, and he's got to get rid of the cat for February 1. So he puts on Facebook, social media, of course, a whole new world to many of us. He puts on the Facebook that he is in a bad spot. He's got this cute cat, a male, and the cat is very sweet. The cat was abandoned by its family, and he's got to put the cat out come February 1 because new tenants are coming and they don't want the cat, and the landlord doesn't want to hear about the cat, and he's allergic to the cat. So, of course, everybody says on the Facebook in the town of Chile, residents of Chile Facebook page, oh, how sad about the cat. You know, everybody wants to talk about how sad this is. And I just, I don't know. I don't know what made me do it. So I wrote back, we can take the cat. We can take the cat tonight. Mind you, I have 3 dogs here in Chile, but I have a nice basement with heat and I said, well, the cat can stay in the basement for foster care, you know, until we find another place for the cat to go because clearly the next day the cat was going to be put in the street and the cat would never have made it. It's an indoor cat and it really probably doesn't have hunting skills and you know, probably wouldn't have made it. So I said, okay, the cat can come live in the basement till we find a place for him to live. So I took the cat. Of course, you know the end of this story. So I took the cat anyway. My son, who I might have referenced before, he lives close to me. He decided he's going to adopt the cat. That's a wonderful thing. My point is that I looked at my 3 little dogs, you know, and I love these little dogs. They've been such good friends to me over my life. I've had about 2 dozen dogs. You know, so, some have found me. I found some of them, and we've all fallen in love with one another. And I was so pleased that I took the cat because the cat is really very sweet. Though I can't keep the cat for a variety of reasons, including my own allergies. I really can't keep the cat. But I was so happy to have the cat. And I thought to myself, what a little Valentine, you know, to have this little guest in the house until he's ready to leave to go to my son's house. But I think to myself, somebody at one time must have loved this cat, right? Because our little theme this evening is love. I think to myself, somebody had to have loved this cat at one time. And the cat, here's the cat's perspective in literature, the cat must have loved the people he was with, I would assume, but that they could walk away from this cat so quickly and so easily and just leave the cat behind to fend for itself. I think to myself, you know, maybe we don't think about love enough, you know, or maybe love sometimes has too much of a high price for people, or maybe love becomes inconvenient. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I just know that this was really an exceptional Valentine's Day. I got to spend it with the people I love, in a town that I love, doing things that I love, with my pets that I love, and of course, the cat now that I love. But anyhow, I really hope that this week was a nice week for you and that you start to appreciate, if you don't already, all the things in your life that bring you such joy, such happiness. People, even if they're temporary people, temporary pets, if they bring you joy, then you have been very, very blessed. So I hope you have enjoyed this little comparative, how it is that we came to love, how love has changed, the significance of it, and maybe how it is that in literature we see this evolution of love and how love takes many forms and sometimes doesn't even realize time and place because we don't have the same kinds of, you know, intensity, necessity. Time is not of the essence. Maybe we have more time to love now, and maybe that's not such a bad thing. We don't have to have such dire decisions about love. We can take more time than our predecessors. So I will speak to you soon. I wish you well always, and thank you for spending some time with me. Bye bye.